Every dawn presents itself as a sacred threshold, a fleeting window through which the soul may enter the realm of deliberate existence or, if unheeded, drift passively into the currents of distraction. To rise intentionally is not merely to open one's eyes, but to awaken with a sense of gravitas, to greet the morning with awareness as though it were both a companion and a mirror. The early hour carries with it a profound potency, untainted by the chaos that will inevitably crowd the day, unspoiled by the petitions of the untested mind, unsullied by the clamorous desires of the unrestrained self. Those who recognize this hour as a crucible for character understand that the first thoughts, the initial movements, and the inaugural intentions of the day possess the power to shape the soul's trajectory in ways that no external circumstance can dictate. To rise with intention is to declare to oneself a sovereignty over inner life, a dominion that no misfortune, no insult, no unexpected misalignment of events can erode. It is an act of sovereignty because the mind, even before it is called upon by others, is called upon by reason itself. Before the first duties are imposed, before the first conversations begin, before the day's relentless demands encroach, one may choose the lens through which all experience is interpreted. The Stoic recognizes that adversity, distraction, and discomfort are not aberrations to flee, but instruments to mold endurance, wisdom, and composure. By greeting the day with premeditated resolve, one secures the first victory of the 24 hours. Mastery over self, before mastery over circumstance is even attempted. The intentional dawn begins with contemplation, yet not in languid or passive thought. It is an incisive scrutiny of what is truly within one's dominion. Thoughts arise as rivers rise from unseen sources, and the mind, if untrained, allows them to sweep it downstream. But the sovereign mind intercepts, discerns, and selects. What is mine to shape today? It asks, what impulses deserve cultivation, and which demands should be met with measured indifference? Each action, each choice, each word to be uttered in the hours ahead can be prefigured, orchestrated, and aligned with virtue. In this practice, the mind becomes a citadel, and the day, a field of honorable conquest where no external enemy may breach the walls erected by foresight and disciplined intention. Rising intentionally also entails a kind of ritualized fortification. The body, tethered to the mind in unyielding alliance, must be acknowledged as an instrument, not a tyrant. The morning is a fertile time for disciplined movement, for deliberate engagement with the senses, for commanding energy rather than surrendering to inertia. Physical readiness informs mental acuity. The alignment of posture, breath, and motion serves as both statement and affirmation. The self will not be passive. It will not be carried like driftwood by the winds of circumstance. It is deliberate, purposeful, and unshakable. In this recognition, even the simplest act, rising from the bed with intention, performing a measured stretch, breathing deeply into the chest, becomes sacred. A microcosm of sovereignty exercised over self. A subtle yet profound assertion that the day will be met with consciousness, not reaction. At this hour, one may also engage in reflection upon the impermanence of all things, a meditation on the brevity of life and the fleetingness of opportunity. To rise intentionally is to confront the fragility of existence and to align the day's choices with the immutable values of reason, courage, justice, and temperance. Each dawn is a summons to act as if every movement, every thought, and every utterance contributes to the eternal architecture of character. In this way, the morning becomes a sanctuary, a place where the mind may rehearse excellence, cultivate composure, and rehearse equanimity against the inevitable turbulences that will come. The intentional mind recognizes that while the world offers neither guarantees nor certainties, the self remains a bastion of agency, capable of shaping its inner landscape even amid the most capricious external forces. The very act of greeting the day with intention is a subtle form of defiance against the seduction of distraction, the inertia of habit, and the tyranny of trivial desires. While the masses may awaken to obligation, routine, and reactive thought, the practitioner of deliberate dawn awakens to mastery, to the sovereign selection of purpose. Even before the world has cast its shadows, even before voices have demanded attention, one may choose the posture of the soul. Calmness, clarity, courage, and resolve can be cultivated in these early hours, forming a foundation so resilient that the tumult of later hours, no matter how violent or intrusive, can no longer topple it. Moreover, this practice transforms perception itself. To rise intentionally is to train the lens through which reality is apprehended. The mind that begins in deliberation observes not with confusion or anger, but with clarity, discernment, and unshakable composure. One learns to view events not as arbitrary oppressors, but as opportunities for virtue to assert itself, as instruments for cultivating patience, wisdom, and fortitude. In these early hours, when the world is still hushed and the noise of triviality has yet to awaken, one has the rare privilege of establishing a lens of reason and prudence, a filter through which all encounters, challenges, and pleasures of the day will pass, unaltered by caprice, unshaken by passion, and undistorted by reactive impulses. In rising with intention, the mind also cultivates anticipation without fear, preparedness without anxiety, to foresee difficulty, to acknowledge the inevitability of discomfort, to imagine insult, misfortune, and misunderstanding not as threats, but as instruments for the exercise of virtue, is to seize the first victory before the day has even begun. In this practice, one becomes both sculptor and sculpture, shaping the self while being shaped by deliberate engagement with reality. By confronting the day in this elevated, intentional way, one ensures that life is not merely endured, but directed. That every hour, every decision, every motion participates in the architecture of excellence. That the soul is not buffeted by chance, but elevated by choice. Asterisk. The mind, untrained and untethered, is the theater of endless illusion. It receives impressions, fleeting and often deceptive, and without scrutiny, it bows to every passing whim, every untested judgment, and every intrusion of passion. To practice disciplined perception is to erect a citadel within the mind, a vantage point from which reality may be observed with clarity, discernment, and sovereignty. It is not enough to live. One must live with vigilance, attending not only to the events that unfold, but to the interpretation of those events. The wise recognize that the world itself is indifferent, neither cruel nor benevolent, but it is the judgment placed upon its movements that bursts suffering or serenity. To master perception is to master the world, not as it appears externally, but as it resonates within the theater of thought. Disciplined perception begins with an unflinching acknowledgement of human vulnerability. Every thought that arises carries the potential to enslave or liberate. The mind, if surrendered to impulse, becomes a servant to illusion, a prisoner to ephemeral desires, and a conspirator in its own disquiet. Yet, when cultivated with deliberation, perception transforms into an instrument of freedom. The soul that observes itself, that interrogates the validity of its impressions, discovers a space between stimulus and reaction, a sanctuary where choice resides unshaken by passion or circumstance. In this sacred interval, reason asserts dominion, discerning what is essential, what is transient, and what is irrelevant to the eternal architecture of character. To practice disciplined perception is to distinguish sharply between what is within one's control and what lies beyond it. External events, the caprices of fortune, and the actions of others are inherently indifferent. They arrive without consultation, without consideration for preference or expectation. It is the untrained mind that convulses with disturbance at each deviation, that measures happiness by alignment with external contingencies, that permits transient fortune to dictate permanent emotion. The disciplined mind, however, surveys these occurrences with detachment. It neither resists nor clings. It accepts the unfolding of reality as material for virtue's exercise. Anger, resentment, envy, and fear, once examined through the lens of reason, lose their dominion. They are no longer tyrants, but shadows whose influence dissolves when observed without attachment. Every impression, whether of insult or praise, success or failure, must be examined for its source, its substance, and its alignment with truth. The mind that has mastered perception asks with precision, is this judgment mine, or is it borrowed from the whims of another? Is it necessary, or is it a projection of desire? Does it cultivate virtue, or does it erode composure? By interrogating each sensation and impulse with such scrutiny, one prevents the mind from succumbing to misrepresentation and distortion. The world will whisper falsehoods, but the vigilant soul listens not to the whisper, but to the discerning ear that separates transient opinion from enduring principle. Discipline, in perception, also entails a deliberate shaping of focus. The untrained mind scatters attention across myriad distractions, surrendering itself to the cacophony of trivialities. But the sovereign mind directs perception toward what is constructive, elevating the intellect and fortifying the character. It prioritizes insight over impulse, understanding over assumption, and virtue over transient comfort. Just as a sculptor sees the form within the marble, the practiced mind discerns the kernel of truth amidst the chaos of appearances. Every observation becomes purposeful. Every sensation becomes an opportunity to exercise reason. Every interaction is filtered through the lens of disciplined evaluation. The practice of disciplined perception is inseparable from the cultivation of inner freedom. To perceive without scrutiny is to be enslaved by circumstance, to react as a leaf tossed upon the wind of events. To perceive with sovereignty is to recognize the elasticity of judgment, the impermanence of sensation, and the boundless capacity of the mind to shape its own response. One becomes immune to the fleeting judgments of others, unperturbed by public approbation or censure, impervious to the shifting tides of fortune. The soul that sees clearly requires no external validation. It measures life by the fidelity of reason and the integrity of inner purpose. Disciplined perception extends to the recognition of internal obstacles. The mind, unexamined, is prone to illusion, bias, and error. Pride may masquerade as confidence, desire as necessity, fear as foresight. Each must be confronted with rigorous inspection, stripped of pretense, and measured against the yardstick of reason. In doing so, one discovers that many disturbances are self-imposed, products of misperception rather than reality. By disentangling thought from impulse, impression from judgment, one acquires a clarity that is unassailable, a freedom that is intrinsic, and a composure that becomes habitual rather than accidental. Equally, disciplined perception nurtures resilience. Life will inevitably present trials that seek to test patience, courage, and equanimity. Misfortune, insult, and loss are not aberrations. They are the instruments through which virtue is exercised. When perception is refined, these trials are neither catastrophes nor burdens, but opportunities, scaffolds upon which the mind may ascend. The impressions of pain, disappointment, or adversity are transformed into tools of insight and refinement. One observes suffering without succumbing, assesses challenges without fear, and acts with reason without reactive impulse. In this alchemy of perception, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The obstacle becomes the teacher, and the tumult of life becomes the arena for the cultivation of excellence. Moreover, disciplined perception shapes emotional depth without permitting turbulence. To observe without attachment does not diminish feeling. Rather, it enhances discernment. Joy, Gratitude and serenity are not dependent upon external circumstance, but arise naturally when perception is aligned with reality and guided by reason. The mind becomes a lens through which life is neither exaggerated nor diminished, but apprehended with proportionality, clarity, and intentionality. It is neither cold detachment nor passive resignation. It is the active governance of thought and sensation in accordance with truth. Finally, the practice of disciplined perception refines judgment in action. Decisions made from a place of clarity, rather than impulse, carry the weight of wisdom. Words spoken, choices enacted, and relationships navigated all benefit from this refined lens. The mind that observes deliberately, filters diligently, and judges with reason becomes a conduit for intentional, purposeful engagement with the world. Life is no longer a series of reactions, but a deliberate composition, orchestrated by a mind attuned to reality, disciplined in thought, and sovereign in perception. Asterisk. Reflection is the lantern that illuminates the unseen recesses of the soul, casting light upon both the splendor and the shadow of one's own character. It is not a mere recounting of events, nor a superficial inventory of deeds. It is a rigorous, unflinching interrogation of self, a deliberate confrontation with truth as it exists beyond vanity, desire, and pretense. The unexamined day is a river flowing past the mind, leaving no mark upon the soul. Yet the practiced reflection arrests the current, examines the waters, and discerns the sediment of thought, action, and intention. It is in this sacred pause, at the close of each day, that the human spirit may ascend from mere reaction to deliberate mastery, transforming experience into wisdom and passage of time into cultivation of virtue. To reflect is to engage in disciplined honesty, a confrontation with the self that tolerates no obfuscation. It requires the courage to scrutinize motives, to observe impulses without embellishment, and to confront failures without evasion. Every lapse of patience, every whisper of envy, every indulgence in fear or desire becomes visible when held against the unflinching standard of reason. Reflection is the mirror in which the soul may see itself unadorned, neither flattered by success nor vilified by misfortune, yet illuminated with clarity sufficient to inspire transformation. The mind that practices this nightly discipline does not recoil from imperfection. It embraces it as raw material for refinement, understanding that virtue is honed not in absence of error, but through its recognition and redress. The art of reflection begins with recollection, a meticulous gathering of the day's impressions. Each encounter, each decision, each emotional surge is revisited with an eye for precision. The subtlety of human experience, often lost in the rush of events, is captured here. A word spoken hastily, a kindness neglected, a thought unexamined. To gather these moments is to construct a map of the inner landscape, to identify where reason was exercised, where judgment faltered, and where the instincts of the soul aligned or diverged from the guiding principles of wisdom. In this act of mental excavation, even the smallest lapse becomes a teacher, and even the briefest moment of virtue becomes a lodestar for future action. Reflection demands that one engage with causality, tracing outcomes not to the whims of fortune, but to choices and judgments. Misfortune is never merely external. It is refracted through perception, colored by expectation, and rendered meaningful by interpretation. By examining the chain of thought that leads from perception to action, one disentangles error from circumstance, separates impulse from reason, and recognizes the ways in which character shapes experience. This is the essence of empowerment, to realize that the world's movements are not sovereign over the mind. That disturbance arises not from events themselves, but from the judgments imposed upon them. In this insight, the reflective soul gains both humility and authority, recognizing limitations while asserting mastery over the inner citadel. The reflective mind also cultivates discernment between the necessary and the superfluous. Life presents countless temptations, distractions, and diversions, many of which masquerade as urgent or important. Through careful examination, one distinguishes between the ephemeral and the enduring, between trivial irritations and genuine challenges, between the clamor of passion and the quiet summons of duty. Reflection clarifies priorities, illuminates values, and refines judgment, ensuring that future action is neither capricious nor reactive, but deliberate, proportionate, and aligned with the principles of reason and virtue. It transforms confusion into order, impulsivity into prudence, and the chaotic tide of daily events into an organized framework for moral cultivation. Moreover, reflection strengthens the capacity for gratitude and humility. By reviewing the day with precision and clarity, one perceives not only shortcomings, but also instances of growth, moments of patience, courage, generosity, and integrity. Each virtuous act, however small, becomes a point of light in the mosaic of character, a reminder that excellence is cultivated incrementally, moment by moment. Gratitude emerges naturally when one recognizes the alignment of effort, intention, and circumstance. When the mind sees that even challenges contribute to growth and that every opportunity to exercise virtue is a gift rather than a burden, humility accompanies this understanding, as one acknowledges both the capacity for error and the potential for improvement, recognizing that the work of the soul is never complete, yet perpetually rewarding. Reflection is inseparable from foresight. By examining the patterns of thought and behavior that emerge across days, one anticipates pitfalls before they arise and discerns opportunities for deliberate action. The reflective mind is strategic, not reactive. It discerns trends, recognizes recurring weaknesses, and prepares remedies in advance. In this way, reflection is both retrospective and prospective, linking past experience with future conduct and transforming memory into instruction, observation into strategy, and awareness into proactive wisdom. The soul that embraces this dual function of reflection cultivates resilience, prudence, and adaptability, recognizing that the preparation for virtue is continuous and requires both insight and intentional planning. Equally, reflection fosters emotional mastery. Human experience is saturated with the turbulence of desire, fear, and attachment. Yet the reflective practice allows one to examine these forces with detachment and clarity. By observing emotional responses without succumbing, tracing their origins, and evaluating their justification, one cultivates equanimity, transforming reactive impulses into conscious, reasoned action. Anger loses its sting, envy dissolves in clarity, and fear diminishes when confronted with understanding. Reflection teaches the mind to inhabit its own governance, to exercise discretion, and to embrace freedom within the domain of inner life, unshaken by external agitation. Finally, reflective practice deepens the capacity for ethical refinement. Every decision is revisited in the light of principle, every action measured against the touchstone of virtue, every word scrutinized for its contribution to wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. In this rigorous examination, the mind develops an internal compass, a permanent calibration that guides conduct, even in the absence of external observation or reward. The reflective soul becomes self-regulating, self-correcting, and self-illuminating, continuously evolving, perpetually aligned with reason, and increasingly capable of translating insight into deliberate action. Fortitude is not forged in comfort, nor refined within the velvet chambers of indulgence. The human spirit, when surrounded solely by ease, grows languid, its edge dulled by convenience, its courage softened by excess. Voluntary discomfort stands as a deliberate rebellion against this quiet erosion of strength. It is the conscious decision to meet difficulty before difficulty demands its arrival, to cultivate resilience not through necessity, but through disciplined choice. Those who willingly introduce challenge into their lives train the soul to remain unshaken when fate inevitably delivers trials beyond anticipation. The individual who embraces voluntary hardship does not seek suffering out of bitterness or spectacle, but out of wisdom. Within measured challenge lies a transformative alchemy. The mind confronts resistance, the body encounters limitation, and the spirit learns to transcend both. When comfort is temporarily relinquished, awareness sharpens. Ordinary conveniences, warmth, abundance, ease reveal themselves as privileges rather than entitlements. Gratitude flourishes naturally when the mind remembers how little it truly requires to endure and thrive. The Stoic practitioner recognizes that fear often flourishes in imagination rather than reality. Many anxieties are born from unfamiliarity with hardship. The mind constructs exaggerated terrors around deprivation, fatigue, cold, hunger, or solitude. Yet when these experiences are encountered deliberately and calmly, their mystique dissolves. The unknown becomes familiar. The intimidating becomes manageable. Voluntary exposure to difficulty dismantles the illusions of fragility and replaces them with evidence of capability. The soul realizes that its endurance far exceeds the timid boundaries drawn by comfort. Consider the transformative discipline of restraint. To willingly abstain from luxury when luxury is readily available strengthens the architecture of self-command. When the appetite clamors for indulgence and the mind calmly declines, a silent victory is achieved. This victory reverberates far beyond the immediate moment, because each act of restraint reinforces the authority of reason over impulse. Gradually, the individual becomes less governed by craving and more guided by principle. Freedom expands precisely where desire once dictated behavior. Physical challenge also serves as a crucible for inner fortitude. The body, when tested through exertion, becomes an ally in the cultivation of discipline. Muscles strain, breath deepens, fatigue whispers its persuasion, yet the will persists. In these moments, the mind learns the language of perseverance. Effort reveals capacity, and endurance reveals identity. One begins to understand that the boundaries once perceived as limitations were merely invitations to grow stronger. Cold mornings, sparse meals, difficult tasks, silent hours of solitude, each voluntary hardship becomes a teacher of resilience. The lesson is never brutality, but awakening. The individual learns that satisfaction derived from simplicity often surpasses the hollow pleasure of excess. A modest meal enjoyed after hunger carries a deeper richness than lavish abundance consumed without appreciation. A moment of warmth after cold feels more profound than constant temperature. Discomfort sharpens perception and restores the senses to their natural vitality. Through voluntary hardship, the mind also confronts pride. Comfort frequently disguises dependency. Convenience quietly convinces the individual that well-being requires endless conditions. Yet when these conditions are removed and the spirit remains steady, a profound realization emerges. The essence of stability resides within, not outside. Circumstances may fluctuate, but character can remain constant. The person who is trained under voluntary difficulty walks through uncertainty with calm assurance, knowing that resilience has already been rehearsed. This discipline also cultivates humility. Encountering difficulty voluntarily reminds the individual of the universal fragility shared by all people. Hunger humbles arrogance. Fatigue dissolves vanity. Exposure to nature's elements softens the illusion of superiority. One begins to see humanity with greater compassion, recognizing that endurance, patience, and courage are shared struggles across every life. Voluntary discomfort therefore becomes not only a path to personal strength, but also a bridge to empathy. Another subtle gift of this practice is clarity. When life is saturated with comfort and distraction, perception becomes clouded by excess stimulation. Yet simplicity strips away noise. In moments of chosen austerity, the mind grows quiet, focused, attentive. Thoughts that once scattered like startled birds settle into deliberate formation. Creativity emerges. Insight surfaces. Wisdom often reveals itself when the mind is removed from the intoxicating fog of convenience. Voluntary hardship also immunizes the spirit against despair. Life inevitably delivers seasons of loss, scarcity, or adversity. Those who have never faced discomfort may interpret these moments as catastrophic disruptions. Yet the individual accustomed to deliberate challenge encounters them with composure. Hardship no longer appears as an alien invader, but as a familiar terrain already explored. The mind does not collapse beneath pressure because it has practiced carrying weight long before necessity demanded it. Courage blossoms quietly within these moments of self-imposed challenge. Courage is not theatrical boldness, but steady perseverance when conditions resist comfort. Each chosen discomfort becomes a rehearsal for integrity under pressure. The individual learns to trust the reliability of effort, to believe in the resilience cultivated through repetition. Strength becomes habitual rather than exceptional. The deeper purpose of voluntary hardship is not deprivation but liberation. When the mind proves to itself that happiness does not depend upon luxury, it becomes immune to the manipulations of circumstance. Wealth may come or depart. Praise may arrive or vanish. Conditions may fluctuate endlessly. Yet the individual who has practiced resilience remains anchored in sufficiency. Contentment grows independent of possession. Such discipline gradually transforms identity. One no longer perceives oneself as fragile, dependent, or easily disturbed. Instead, a quiet confidence develops a recognition that endurance, restraint, and clarity have become intrinsic qualities rather than temporary achievements. The spirit becomes like tempered steel, flexible yet unbreakable, capable of bending without shattering under strain. Voluntary hardship ultimately restores the individual to a profound simplicity. The mind ceases to chase endless comforts and instead appreciates the quiet richness of presence, effort, and resilience. Life becomes less about accumulating pleasure and more about refining character. Every challenge embraced deliberately becomes another brushstroke upon the portrait of inner strength, another testament to the extraordinary resilience hidden within ordinary human nature. Gratitude is the quiet architecture of a noble mind. It is not merely a polite expression or a fleeting acknowledgement of fortune. It is a disciplined perception that transforms the ordinary fabric of life into a tapestry of wonder. When gratitude becomes habitual, existence itself begins to shimmer with meaning. The air we breathe, the light that greets the morning horizon, the silent rhythm of the heart within the chest, each reveals itself not as a mundane certainty, but as an extraordinary privilege granted for a brief and mysterious moment. Many people wander through life blinded by familiarity. The mind grows accustomed to abundance, and what was once miraculous becomes invisible through repetition. Gratitude restores sight. It invites the soul to notice the quiet magnificence hidden within everyday moments. A simple conversation, a calm evening sky, the warmth of sunlight touching the face. These small experiences hold immeasurable richness when observed with appreciative awareness. The grateful mind does not require extravagant events to feel fulfilled. It discovers beauty within simplicity and treasure within the ordinary rhythm of living. To cultivate gratitude is to refine perception itself. The untrained mind gravitates toward complaint, exaggerating inconvenience while ignoring abundance. It magnifies discomfort and diminishes blessings. Yet the disciplined mind gently redirects its focus. It learns to recognize opportunities instead of obstacles, lessons instead of burdens, and growth instead of grievance. Gratitude becomes a lens through which the world appears vibrant, dynamic, and generous rather than hostile or indifferent. Within this perspective lies immense psychological strength. The person who practices gratitude becomes resistant to despair. Even during seasons of adversity, the mind retains its ability to recognize fragments of goodness scattered across the landscape of difficulty. A challenging day may still contain a moment of kindness, a breath of fresh air, or a fleeting glimpse of beauty. Gratitude gathers these fragments and arranges them into a constellation of hope. The individual who learns this art understands that life rarely offers perfection, yet it consistently provides reasons for appreciation. Gratitude also nurtures humility. When one acknowledges the countless factors contributing to daily existence, arrogance dissolves. The food upon the table represents the labor of unseen hands. The roads traveled were constructed by unknown workers. The knowledge we carry was preserved by generations before us. Every moment of comfort, every resource available, every opportunity encountered emerges from a vast network of contributions. Gratitude recognizes this invisible cooperation and responds with quiet reverence rather than entitlement. This reverence cultivates deeper relationships. A grateful person naturally radiates warmth, attentiveness, and sincerity. Appreciation expressed toward others strengthens bonds, encouraging generosity and trust. People feel seen and valued when their efforts are acknowledged. Gratitude, therefore, becomes a subtle yet powerful form of leadership within human interaction. It uplifts communities, softens conflicts, and encourages collaboration. A simple acknowledgement delivered with authenticity can transform an ordinary interaction into a moment of genuine connection. The Stoic perspective deepens gratitude by emphasizing impermanence. Everything we experience, pleasure, companionship, health, youth, opportunity, exists only temporarily. Recognizing this truth intensifies appreciation. When the mind remembers that every blessing may someday fade, it becomes more attentive to the present moment. Conversations are listened to more carefully. Sunsets are observed with greater wonder. Laughter shared with loved ones carries deeper resonance. Gratitude transforms fleeting experiences into treasured memories because awareness amplifies their significance. Another profound dimension of gratitude lies in its relationship with adversity. Difficult experiences often conceal hidden instruction. A failure may illuminate overlooked weaknesses. A disappointment may redirect energy toward a more meaningful path. A moment of hardship may cultivate patience, endurance, or compassion. The grateful mind searches for these lessons within discomfort rather than resisting them entirely. Instead of asking only, "Why did this happen?" it also asks, "What wisdom is concealed within this challenge?" Through such inquiry, suffering becomes a catalyst for growth. Obstacles cease to appear as cruel interruptions and instead emerge as opportunities for development. Gratitude does not deny pain, but it recognizes that adversity frequently shapes character with greater precision than comfort ever could. The resilient soul thanks even its difficulties for the insight they provide. Gratitude also refines ambition. When individuals pursue achievement without appreciation, success becomes hollow and endlessly insufficient. Each accomplishment merely triggers the pursuit of another. Satisfaction retreats further into the distance. Yet when ambition is balanced with gratitude, achievement gains meaning without dominating identity. The grateful individual strives for excellence while simultaneously valuing the present stage of the journey. Progress becomes fulfilling rather than frantic. This practice ultimately cultivates inner abundance. Wealth is often measured through possession, status, or recognition, yet the grateful person discovers a deeper form of richness. Contentment blossoms from awareness rather than accumulation. The individual realizes that happiness is not postponed until certain conditions are met. It emerges naturally when the mind acknowledges what is already present. Gratitude, therefore, dissolves the illusion that fulfillment resides somewhere beyond the horizon. Daily practice strengthens this mindset, a quiet pause in the morning to recognize the privilege of another day, a brief reflection in the evening to appreciate moments of kindness, learning, and growth, a deliberate acknowledgement of people who contribute to one's journey. These small habits accumulate gradually, shaping perception and transforming emotional landscapes. Over time, gratitude becomes instinctive. The mind instinctively notices light rather than darkness, opportunity rather than limitation. Life begins to feel expansive rather than restrictive. Even routine moments acquire a subtle brilliance because awareness magnifies their presence. When gratitude becomes the foundation of perception, existence itself feels like a remarkable gift rather than a burdensome obligation. The individual walks through the world with open eyes and a receptive heart, discovering wonder in places previously overlooked. Joy no longer depends on rare circumstances. It arises from attentive participation in the present moment. Such a life radiates quiet fulfillment. It influences others through calm optimism and steady appreciation. Gratitude becomes more than a private emotion. It becomes a philosophy of living, a graceful posture of the soul toward existence. And when a person learns to greet each day with sincere appreciation, even the simplest breath becomes a celebration of life itself.